Welcome to the Three Martini Lunch. Grab a stool next to Greg Columbus of Radio America and Jim Garrity of National Review. Three Martinis coming up.
Really glad you're with us for the Tuesday edition of the Three Martini Lunch. We have so much to get to today. We're going to be talking about how Snoop Dogg somehow has become favorable on the side of cultural conservatives, and now he's being demonized on the left. We'll tell you why that's happening, and just the transformation of Snoop over the years is quite something, but we'll get into all of that. We'll also talk about Donald Trump trying to fire a member of the Federal Reserve Board. She is not accepting that firing, and so there's going to be a big legal fight over that. And we'll also take a look at Kamala Harris. She definitely let the Democrats down in 2024, and she's still letting them down from the 2024 campaign in a lot of ways, Jim. So I'm sure you're licking your chops here to get into this stuff.
I was going to say, we could do something funny about Kamala Harris just about every day. And my attitude was, all right, that's almost too easy. It's fish in a barrel. If we're going to talk about Kamala Harris, it has to be actual news. And the New York Times had actual news about her yesterday afternoon into early evening. I had been leaning in this direction. I suspect she will not be running for president in 2028. You're going to have to wait just several seconds to hear about that right after this message.
Boy, it seems like Kamala Harris has been in the headlines a long time. And when you hear all sorts of news like this, makes you want to get some good rest to deal with the craziness the next morning. But if you're going to do that, get Boll and Branch sheets. As mentioned yesterday, Jim and I have both received Boll and Branch sheets. Thread quality, they say, not thread count is what really matters, because Boll and Branch uses the highest quality organic cotton threads for long-lasting sheets that get softer over time, which means the more you wash them, the better they feel, Jim. It's amazing.
Remember, these sheets are made with the finest 100% organic cotton in a soft, breathable, durable weave. Their products have a quality that you will feel immediately. And as Greg just mentioned, they become softer with every wash. So you'll actually want to wash your sheets. And remember, this comes with a 30-night worry-free guarantee. I have a feeling you're going to know within a couple of nights, yes, I like these sheets. I don't think you're going to need all 30. But just in case, if you're really indecisive, you have 30 days to decide.
Yeah, and they also have the deep pockets, which fit around your mattress, so the corners of the sheets, the fitted sheet, don't keep popping off. It's fantastic that way. Big pillowcases, and they just feel better as you get ready to sleep. And so feel the difference an extraordinary night's sleep can make with Boll and Branch. Get 15% off plus free shipping on your first set of sheets at bollandbranch.com/3martini. All spelled out, THREE Martini. That's Boll and Branch, BOLLAND, branch.com/3martini to save 15% and unlock free shipping. Exclusions do apply. All right, Jim, you're a child of the 80s, just like I am. Do you remember the movie Brewster's Millions with Richard Pryor and John Candy? Richard Pryor is a minor league baseball pitcher, but he's getting old and he doesn't really have a major league future at all. And all of a sudden, this long-lost uncle that he's never met dies, and he's the only person they can find who's even related to him. And so they tell him, this guy was really rich. You can take $1 million and leave right now, and the whole thing will be over. Or if you can spend $30 million in 30 days with no assets and nothing to show for it, you get $300 million. So of course he takes that deal, and ultimately he successfully gets the $300 million. Well, $30 million, spending that in 30 days, that's a piker when it comes to Kamala Harris and the 2024 campaign. Jim, as you report in the Jolt today, she spent $1.5 billion over 15 weeks. Or $100 million per week. And the crazy part is she was still in debt. The DNC had to step in and cover campaign debts. And so when you consider she went 0 for 7 in the swing states, that is a really poor use of money.
All right, Greg, I'm going to dive into Kamala Harris in just a second, but I actually have a logistical question. Why couldn't Brewster just go to Las Vegas and bet all of it on either red or black and just keep betting until he lost?
I think there were clauses, like you couldn't give it away. You had to spend it on things. So, yeah.
As usual, the answer always comes down to lawyers. So, in addition to every other reason of why Democrats would not want Kamala Harris to run again in 2020, she's already run against Trump and fallen short. She did not grow into the job of vice presidency. Yes, she was thrown in probably a challenging circumstance, and Joe Biden had set up a record that was going to be very tough to defend. But in the end, having more resources than any other campaign had ever had, she couldn't, as you mentioned, she not just lost, she went 0 for 7. Some of those post-campaign books that came out said that she was completely blindsided by the loss and fully expected to win on election night, which is, again, not reassuring. It's a sign she thinks she's doing fine when she clearly wasn't. The $20 million at heart in the context of $1.5 billion doesn't seem like a lot. But there were, people noticed that the election was over on election night, and people kept getting fundraising emails from the Kamala Harris campaign saying, "We need your help." And people were like, "Why? What are you spending money on? We gave you more money than anybody's ever had before. Where did all the money go?" And so there was a statement from her finance chair saying, "Look, there will be no debt on our next filing statement," which was okay. Technically, that was true. But what he neglected to mention was that there was no debt on the next campaign finance filing station because the Democratic National Committee stepped in, and there was a handshake agreement that the DNC would cover any additional costs so that they would not have the embarrassment of having raised $1.5 billion and then ending up with campaign debt at the end of the year. So that means that the DNC started this cycle with about $20 million in debt that it had to pay off, which is why sharp-eyed reporters were noticing they've been having, we had record fundraising. Fundraising is going so terrific, but the cash on hand kept going lower and lower. So now we know. And right now, as of the end of last month, DNC has about $15 million on hand, which is obviously not terrible shape, but not great. The Republican National Committee has $80 million in cash on hand. Now, it's 2025. It's an off-year election. There's going to be a lot of fundraising between now and then, but as you and I have discussed in this podcast, you got gubernatorial elections in New York and Virginia. You've got state legislative elections in both those states. You've got a couple special House elections. They haven't been terribly competitive districts, but if you're the DNC, you'd like to be able to throw some money at those candidates in each of those places. And a whole bunch of mayoral races across the country. So, you'd rather have more money than not money. You'd rather not be spending $20 million on expenditures that were already made last year. So not only did Kamala Harris not win the presidential election, not only did she not have coattails for the House and Senate, she also put them in a $20 million hole to start this cycle off. Now, is this likely to be, a huge factor in the midterms or even in the 2025 campaigns? Probably not. But it's, again, another sign that she just created more and more problems for her party. And so if you're a Democrat, why on earth would you want a rerun of all this? What's going to be different in the 2028 cycle that's going to be, that wasn't as an advantage of this one? She got handed the nomination. She didn't have to spend any money on a primary last time. So that's where things stand. It's kind of it's embarrassing for her. The most interesting theory to come out of this is this is coming out now because her memoir comes out later this in the fall. Already pre-ordered my copy. I've already been assigned by NR to review it. Spoiler alert, I'm not expecting to love it. We'll see what happens. But the idea is that there are people at the DNC who are irked with her, and this is coming out now to step on her. And if she ever does any interviews about this, for somebody to say, "Hey, how did you get $1.5 billion and do so badly, and even then end up with debt that the DNC had to pay off on your behalf?"
Yeah, it's a great microcosm of how Democrats handle your money and politicians in general. So, yeah, I mean, the news is piling up so negatively for her. And with Gavin Newsom clearly trying to position himself and never leave the spotlight among Democratic voters, he's kind of elbowing her out of the picture in terms of California. Doesn't want an intrastate fight with that. And so I think she's going to be kind of an afterthought, especially if she doesn't do much in terms of stumping for other candidates. And I'm not sure how many states and candidates are going to want her, especially if they're really close races, given her track record. So I don't feel like she's going to be a real prominent person, except maybe on the book tour, coming into the midterms and beyond. Because if you're not a prominent figure after the 26 midterms, then you got to ramp back up big time. And I don't think she's ready for that either.
One of the reasons California Democrats were not thrilled about the idea of her running for governor, which she's since said that she is not going to do, was that if she ran, inevitably she'd have to take questions. And some of those questions would be, so the entirety of your presidency, you didn't notice Biden getting older? You didn't notice any sign that he was starting to slow down mentally and physically? And there's just no good answer to that. The answer is either, oh, yeah, I noticed it, and he looks bad, and the idea that she didn't say anything when she was vice president, or she implausibly insists, no, he always seemed sharp as a tack and, full of it, and all these other things that seem just blatantly implausible in light of the stories that have since come out of Biden wasn't remembering the names of key aides and was kind of zoning out in meetings, and people could barely hear him when he talked, and various other signs that being an octogenarian was really starting to catch up on Biden.
Just to go back to Brewster's Millions for a second, it came out, I believe, in 1985. And just to show you how different things were in 1985, Jim, it was based in New York City. And one of the ways that he spent a big chunk of money was that he was watching the local news. And the local news was so disappointed in the two leading mayoral candidates that year that they couldn't endorse anyone. And so then Monty Brewster launches this huge none of the above campaign and gets to spend his money that way. Can you imagine a New York City mayor's race where the top two candidates are completely unacceptable?
How about the top three? There's some who might say top four. We have a soft spot for one of them. But yeah, boy, imagine not having good options for mayor of New York City. Good thing we have avoided that apocalyptic scenario. I'm not saying everybody's leaving New York City. I'm just saying I saw Kurt Russell trying to get out of it recently. So.
He's going to lead the evacuation. All right. Well, here's some good news for this fall. Fall is planting season. And did you know that many plants and trees actually do better when they're planted this time of year? But you've got to know where to start. And that's why I love fast-growing trees. It doesn't matter if you live in the sunny south or if the air is getting chilly where you are, their plant experts can help you find the perfect fit for your space. And we've had many excellent plants from fast-growing trees. We've had the lemon tree. We've had different spices. We now have the snake plant, which looks fantastic. You will not be disappointed with fast-growing trees.
Big yard, small yard, no yard, whatever your situation is, Fast Growing Trees has more than 6,000 plants to fit any space, from indoor plants to fruit trees to full-sized privacy trees and a lot more. You don't have to drive around to nurseries and big garden centers and choose plants from a limited assortment and make a mess in the back of your car. Fast Growing Trees makes it easy to order online, and your plants are delivered to your door in just a few days. So whether you're trying to add privacy, shade, or natural beauty to your yard, Fast Growing Trees has in-house experts ready to help you make the right selection, with plant experts on call to order growing and care advice.
This fall, get up to 50% off on select plants and other deals at fastgrowingtrees.com. Please use the code Martini at checkout for an extra 15% off your purchase. That's 15% extra savings at fastgrowingtrees.com and using the code Martini at checkout. Now is the perfect time to plant. Offer valid for a limited time. Terms and conditions may apply. Check out the link in the show notes and support the show. All right, Jim, on to our second martini, the bad martini here. And the president has decided that he wants to fire a member of the Federal Reserve Board. He is trying to fire Lisa Cook, member of the Board of Governors, and saying that she is being fired with cause, because that's what the 1935 Supreme Court decision said when it comes to independent agencies. Jim has written excellently on this in the Morning Jolt today. Trump's argument is that, quote, you signed one document attesting that a property in Michigan would be your primary residence for the next year. 2 weeks later, you signed another document for a property in Georgia stating that it would be your primary residence for the year. It is inconceivable that you were not aware of your first commitment when making the second. It is impossible that you intended to honor both. And so, Jim, now the legal fight begins because Lisa Cook is not going to leave. There's going to be a legal fight over this. And you say there's multiple, actually, Supreme Court precedents for how this could play out.
Yeah, I think right now the Trump administration has a thin reed or thin ice, or whichever metaphor you want, for not a terribly strong case before the Supreme Court. That could change, but right now what we have is earlier this year, the issue of whether the president could fire a member of the National Labor Relations Board and a member of the Merit Systems Protection Board. I'll be perfectly honest, I didn't realize we had a Merit Systems Protection Board, but Trump fired two people and they sued saying you don't have the authority to fire us. The Supreme Court said, yes, you do. However, in their defense, they said, well, look, if he can fire us, Trump could fire people on the Federal Reserve Governors Board, and that would cause chaos in the economy, so you don't want that to happen, Supreme Court. Well, Supreme Court came out and said, well, we do think the president has the authority to fire you two. We don't think the president has the authority to fire people on the Federal Reserve, saying, quote, the Federal Reserve is a uniquely structured quasi-private entity that follows in the distinct historical tradition of the first and second banks of the United States. So a whole bunch of people said, well, this is the Supreme Court kind of trying to say, Mr. President, don't go down this road. We're very, very skeptical of this. However, everybody agrees that a president could fire someone from the Federal Reserve Board of Governors if they had, quote, for cause. The problem is there's not one uniform standard under the law of what for cause is. But for obvious, let's say, a member of the Board of Governors became an axe murderer. Then yes, the president would be on very solid ground for firing that person. The question is, do you have a situation of cause for Lisa Cook in that there is this claim that she signed 2 separate residences were going to be her primary residence on her mortgage applications? So this is a criminal referral letter from William Polt, who's director of the U.S. Federal Housing Finance Agency, to the U.S. Department of Justice. This is not an indictment. This is a statement of, hey, we have noticed this. We believe there is potential violation of the law. Attorney General Bondi, people at the Department of Justice, you decide what you should do here. I think if there had been an indictment, this would be a stronger argument. I think, and it's, for all we know, this might be in the works. They might be arguing this in front of a grand jury right now. I think with an indictment, you have a somewhat stronger case. I think we'd all agree if there was a conviction, then yes, then you definitely have you'd have a pretty strong argument that there is a reason for cause. Having said that, I put the link to this assessment by Georgetown Law School professor Adam Levitin. Now here's the thing. It gets kind of into the weeds, but the general gist is that this is for a statement in a loan application, but it's not a statement. It's considered a promise, not a representation of current fact. He makes the argument about basically this is the equivalent of, let's say you spend part of the year in one place and part of the year in the other place. You may genuinely contend that you have 2 primary residences. This is also the principal residence versus primary residence. Principal residence is not defined in the security instruments, but it's not the same phrasing as primary residence, and it can cover more than one residences. If you winter in Florida and spend the rest of the year in New York, you get your mail to both places. Conceivably, you can only vote in one place, but it's not the situation where you only have one legal residence, like filing for the IRS or something like that. So, at some point, the U.S. Solicitor General is going to go before the Supreme Court that had already kind of said, Mr. President, don't go down this road because we think this is a separate category. And they're going to say that the president has the authority to fire a member of the Board of Governors because of the accusation of having committed a crime. Not even an indictment, not even a conviction. I think the Supreme Court is going to look at that skeptically, but I guess there's only one way to find out.
So Trump's jumping the gun here. He should have waited for something to come out of the DOJ.
Assuming you can get a conviction, sure. If the idea is, like, let's say you indict her, you fire her, and then she gets acquitted. Well, does she then have the authority to get, could she get her job back? Was this a false accusation? I would want to be as solid ground as possible before I did something like this, particularly when there was a statement from the court that was kind of your power to do this. The whole question is the Federal Reserve. Trump wants to believe it's an extension of the executive branch, and thus he has the authority to hire people and fire people. By the way, people who are on the board of governors of the Federal Reserve, they are nominated by the president. They are confirmed by the Senate. But once they're there, they're supposed to be acting independently. The idea is the Federal Reserve is supposed to be able to make decisions that are in the best, not just short-term, but long-term and medium-term decision for the country. And those may not always be popular decisions. So that's why they were granted this sort of quasi-independent status by Congress. Now, you can find people who think it's a bad idea. I myself kind of agnostic on that, but I do think the law is pretty clear on this. And I think the message from the Supreme Court earlier this year was like, no, you do not have full authority to get rid of these people. Also, this would be a case where it'd be much more helpful if the president had not spent the past 6 months raging against Jerome Powell and saying, you idiot, you're screwing up the economy, I'm doing all these terrific things. And the idea that this is coming across as a political vendetta, Trump wants to get Cook off so he can point like-minded people onto the Board of Governors. So we will see how this shakes out. I don't think Cook will be cleaning out her office anytime soon. And I think that, until a court upholds this dismissal, she'll act like she's still on there. And, I think Trump always extends his power until someone tells him no. And now the question is whether the Supreme Court will say, no, Mr. President, you can't fire this person because you have not demonstrated you have cause to do so.
Yeah, so now it'll work its way through the courts, and maybe it'll be on an expedited track given the prominence of the issue. Maybe not. It might give the DOJ time to actually file charges. I don't know.
Yeah.
But what is it with people and mortgage shenanigans? We've got this one, potentially. Adam Schiff declaring Maryland as his primary residence when he's supposedly representing California. And, of course, the one that really takes the cake is Tish James, who declares her primary residence in Virginia and claims she's married to her dad.
Yeah, that... I'm trying to work in anyway, let's just think of all the different off-color jokes that Jim could have made here. Just let your imagination marinate on that. All of these come from William Polt, director of the Federal Housing Finance Agency, a Trump appointee. Now, it is conceivable that he's just really good at his job and is really good at spotting this. What people have speculated is he was, either he was given a list of Trump opponents or he himself came up with a list of Trump opponents and said, I'm going to look at every mortgage application of every one of these people, and I'm going to look to see if I can find something that looks like fraud. And, by the way, the idea that Tish James and Adam Schiff and Cook are not good people, that's conceivable. That certainly is an option. I'm not making a full-throated defense here. But one of the problems of having a president who goes on social media and rages, it's the same way that, like, Tish James undermined her indictment of Trump by explicitly campaigning for office, promising, I am going to indict Trump. I'll figure out the details later. When you do that, it makes it look like a political vendetta. And so, you could say this is turned about as fair play for this, but really this is not what the criminal justice system is supposed to be used for.
Yeah, I think we can safely conclude, regardless of the mortgage issues, that 2 out of those 3 are definitely not good people, and I just don't know enough about Lisa Cook to make a determination on that. But when it comes to Tish James and Adam Schiff, I think we've probably seen more than enough. All right. Well, if you're worried about staying on at the Fed, or you're worried that the person you fired at the Fed is not going to leave, maybe some lines in the face developing as a result of that. And so, guys in particular, wouldn't you like to look a little younger? Just feel more confident when you look in the mirror. That's exactly why Caldera Lab is here. Their high-performance skincare is designed specifically for guys, simple, effective, and backed by science.
These are cutting-edge formulas developed by leading cosmetic chemists who specialize in men's skincare. Caldera Labs has rigorous research and development cycles, so every product takes years to develop, test, and perfect. If they don't love it, you're not going to get it because they won't release it. They have non-comedogenic formulas. No comedy here. It's very serious, sometimes even tragic, but it will not clog your pores. They are certified cruelty-free, no animal testing ever, and they are plastic neutral. For every product sold, they remove the same amount of plastic from the environment.
And in a consumer study, 100% of men, that seems like a lot, said their skin looked smoother and healthier. 97% noticed improved hydration and texture. 94% reported a more youthful appearance. So upgrade your skincare with Caldera Lab. Easy, effective, and made for men. Skip the drugstore and try it for yourself. Visit calderalab.com/3ml and use the code 3ml for 20% off your first order. Again, that's calderalab.com/3ml with the code 3ml for 20% off. All right, Jim, on to our crazy martini now. And for the longest time, I've not really been a Snoop Dogg fan, and I'm probably still not. Back in the day, he was basically known for a rap career, which started long after Kamala Harris said she listened to him while in college, by the way. Also, he was known for smoking dope, and I'm pretty sure he still does on a regular basis, and he liked to hang out with USC football. Then suddenly, he became this pop culture phenomenon. He was absolutely embraced by Madison Avenue. I think some of us, maybe a lot of us last year at the Olympics, got even a little bit tired of every commercial break seeing Snoop somewhere hanging around Paris. Well, Snoop is now a grandfather. He's in his mid-50s, and he's getting upset with all of the cultural leftism getting injected into movies for kids. In this interview, he talks about taking his grandson to a movie connected to the Toy Story franchise, and the question he did not expect to get going to a kids movie.
I took my grandson to see, what was the movie with Buzz Lightyear?
Toy Story?
Not that one, but
the new Buzz. The Lightyear. I think it's called Lightyear.
Yeah, with Kiki Palmer's in that movie.
Okay.
She plays like the daughter. So we watching it, and the lady, which is Kiki's mama, they move on into the space years, they move down the line, they're like, man, she had a baby with a woman. Well, my grandson in the middle of the movie like, Papa Snoop, how she have a baby with a woman? She a woman. Oh, I didn't come in for this. I just came and watched the movie. Hey, man, watch the movie. They just said she had a baby. They both women's. How did she have a baby? Shh. The movie ain't over with. So it's like, I'm scared to go to the movies now. Like, y'all throwing me in the middle of I don't have an answer for it.
So, Jim, I guess as you get older, your perspectives change given your family situation and that sorts of things. I don't think we would have heard that from Snoop all that long ago, but I think he's reflecting what a lot of people are saying. Could you please, especially leave this out of kids programming, but just kind of leave us alone in general in the culture? We're sick of having it stuffed in our face every single time.
First of all, Greg, actually, listeners, before I even get started on this, you should understand that we put a lot of work into this podcast, and really Greg puts in way more work than I do. Nothing he did today took more effort than bleeping out all the four-letter words used by Snoop while discussing this cute conversation he had with his grandson. But so the other thing also is that Snoop Dogg has reportedly, at least a couple of years ago, said he had quit smoking weed. This is very much like Tom Brady retiring. This is kind of like when Bill Clinton announced he would no longer be diddling the interns. This is just for somebody who built their reputation. This is a legend. In fact, earlier this year when, actually just about a week or two ago, Trump was talking about when he talked about the deployment of the National Guard into Washington, D.C., he talked about how terrible the lawn on the mall looked. Now, by the way, when you have like 1,000,001, tourists walking all over it all the time, it's going to get trod down a little bit more than some other places. But he said, nobody knows more about grass than I do. And I was like, no. Snoop Dogg knows more. That's a... There's something very funny about this anecdote, and not just the fact that he's swearing like a sailor while describing this. Because Snoop Dogg, who in addition to his, 1,000,001 hip hop, he's one of the most famous rap hip hop stars of all time. I've heard somebody make the argument that he was the one who went most mainstream. Now, whether you want to attribute that to his friendship with another notorious convicted felon, Martha Stewart, or other, just the fact like something about Snoop Dogg compared to Dr. Dre, compared to Eminem, compared to Kanye, that something about Snoop actually doesn't seem all that threatening to mainstream America. And that he's the guy from the hood who you can relate and hang around with and who you just want to have some gin and juice with him or something. So he kind of became this almost increasingly ubiquitous mainstream person. And yes, this is the same guy worried about teaching the wrong values and morals to children who made Snoop Dogg Hustlers, Diary of a Pimp, which was a combination of hip hop and porn. So yes, this is made in his younger days. I'd observed the odd thing that so we now have Snoop Dogg, not just the unofficial Olympic mascot, doing everything with NBC Sports and being a roving correspondent and almost is this national cuddly figure. Ice-T, co-creator of Cop Killer, played a cop on Law & Order for 23 years. There are people in law enforcement who don't spend 23 years on the force the way Ice-T did. And Ice Cube did a whole bunch of cuddly family movies in which he basically was a guy who falls in love with a woman, finds out she has kids, agrees to take the kids on a road trip or something like that, and wacky hijinks ensue. Last I saw, Ice Cube was defending the Earth in War of the Worlds by not getting up from his computer ever in the course of the movie, and it was generally considered one of the worst movies of all time. When you see these hardcore gangster rapper Edge, gonna bust a cap and you know what, from the 90s, all of them turned into dads. All of them probably turned into granddads. All of a sudden, they got old. And now they're complaining about what's on screen in here. And by the way, it is kind of funny and odd, but I think Snoop Dogg isn't saying you can't have gay and lesbian characters in movies. He's just saying keep it age appropriate and light. He was far from alone in people complaining about Lightyear. It came out in 2022. You might argue if there's been a backlash to woke, this was one of the, I don't want to say tipping points, but Lightyear, based on the Toy Story movies, was supposed to be about a spaceman in space. And all of a sudden, there's a Heather has two mommies moment. And a whole bunch of parents felt like this was but if you want to make a movie about a kid being raised by two dads or two moms, you go ahead and make that movie. And just put it in the commercials. Let people know this is what this movie is about. If you say your movie is about an animated spaceman with Chris Evans doing the voice, then it should be about that, and you don't want to slip it under the radar. So I think Snoop Dogg is not being unreasonable in his objection here. The fact that a guy who was, let's face it, associated with social and cultural libertinism for such a long time is objecting is probably a sign to Hollywood, and just a recognition that there are a lot of people in Hollywood who like to believe that everybody who objects to scenes like that is some sort of closed-minded, arch-conservative, repressed non-sex positive, there are all kind of terms for it. Does Snoop Dogg seem like a particularly uptight individual? Does Snoop Dogg seem like a particularly, closed-minded, Bible-thumping, blue-nosed, no, there's like, if Snoop Dogg's, by the way, also you're already seeing efforts to try to cancel Snoop Dogg. I would contend, by the way, how do you cancel a gangster rapper, Greg? Like the whole thing is that they're notorious outlaws. Yeah, yo, I'm down with the hood. I'm down with my homies, but I'm not homophobic. That would be wrong. That would be it's kind of this very bizarre contrast. Well, you can break law, you can break certain cultural expectations, but not that one. That's not okay. So I suspect this kerfuffle will blow over. But it is kind of funny to see Snoop Dogg, defender of traditional values.
Well, there are certain things the left simply cannot countenance. Abortion, being on the other side, being pro-life on the abortion issue, and being opposed or even slightly opposed to the LGBT agenda. Those are like the sacred cows on the left right now culturally, and anyone who crosses the path is going to get nuked by a lot of them, and that's what Snoop Dogg is facing today. I would say, I don't think you have the conversation in the theater, but be ready for your kids to have those questions, because in the culture today, they're going to see it at some point. Maybe have the conversation preemptively so they're ready for it. Maybe you watch the movie with them, and so you're able to respond to it. And so as a Bible-believing family, we would simply say God's design for intimacy is a marriage between one man and one woman, and anything other than that is sin. So, but be ready for the conversation, because if you haven't had it yet with your kids, it's coming at some point.
Well, kids, it turns out Hollywood is full of these people we call degenerates.
That's not far off. It's not far off. So. Oh, Jim, on to tomorrow. Have a great day. See you Wednesday.
See you Wednesday, Greg.
Jim Garrity, National Review. I'm Greg Corombos of Radio America. Thanks so much for being with us today. Please be sure to subscribe to the 3 Martini Lunch podcast. If you don't already, tell your friends about us as well. We'd love to have them listening. Thanks also for your 5-star ratings and your kind reviews. Please keep those coming. Get us on your home devices. All you have to say is play 3 Martini Lunch podcast. Follow us both on X. He's at Jim Garrity. I'm at Greg Corombos. Have a terrific Tuesday. Join us again Wednesday for the next 3 Martini Lunch.